you're really no longer an architect, an engineer, or a contractor when you start your own business.
Business of Architecture, episode 333.
Hello, and welcome back, Architect Nation. I'm Enoch Sears, and this is the show where you'll discover tips, strategies, and secrets for building a profitable and impactful architecture practice, a practice that lets you do your best work more often. Today's episode is sponsored by Smart Practice, Business of Architecture step-by-step business training program for architects that shows you how to structure your practice so you can focus on doing your best work instead of being bogged down with the complexity of running a business. Build the business you need to do the work that you want. Discover more by going to businessafarchitecture.com/smart. My guest today is Matthew Gullo. Matthew Gullo is a native Houstonian and graduated from Texas A&M University with a degree in architecture. After 14 years into an architecture career as a licensed architect, he found himself as a principal of a multi-office, Texas-based firm with a need for a change. In 2013, after being married for almost 2 years to his supportive and beautiful wife, he felt like his back was against the wall career-wise. The market was on an uphill climb, but the Houston office of the firm he was with was experiencing some light workloads. With the mood in the office waning, a strong desire to see what he could do on his own, and a lot of deep questions on his mind, he started writing and publishing his thoughts on a blog called Smart, Simple Life. He was exploring ideas, coaching, self-development, business acumen, and alternatives to the traditional architecture career. To put it bluntly, Matthew was motivated to make a bigger change than just going to another firm, and he didn't want to be dependent on someone else to bring work into the office. So in December of 2013, he put in his notice to leave his principal position after having lunch with his great friend, Chris Grizzaffi. That was at the time, and is still a part of, Keller Williams Real Estate. They talked about how the Smart Simple Life blog worked, his insights about it, and how a lot of the things that he was writing about paralleled Keller Williams' teachings and philosophies. With a cheat sheet to getting a real estate license that Chris gave him, Matthew devised a plan to become licensed in 14 days. That's a little bit less than an architectural career. Over the next 10 days, he got up super early before work to study and complete all the required courses, took a 2-day prep class, scheduled a test, and passed. In the last days of 2013, Matthew signed up with Keller Williams and took their extensive training called Ignite during the first week in January. With that training, the great people in his office, his coach Sherry Malone, Chris, the support of his family and wife, he was able to sell 20 properties that first year, doing almost $4 million in volume, and was named a rising star in real estate. In 2016, his wife was able to quit her job and began helping Matthew part-time. They also hired someone to help show properties so he could focus on growing the company. Today, the Gullo Group is in the top 1% of realtors in Houston. They have a full-time operations manager, an agent that focuses on buyers, a marketing department, and several partners that help them get it all done. Matthew, welcome to the Business of Architecture podcast.
Well, thank you for having me, man. I'm very excited and honored to be here for sure. Me and you kind of go way back on a certain level, and this is really just awesome to actually be doing this. So thank you.
You know, it's true. It was around that same time, 2012, actually, when I started the same thing, an exploration on a blog of exploring alternative careers and looking at the business side of architecture in my case. And so we did connect back at that time, and we've kept in touch since then. It's been amazing to see what you've created now. So it's been, look, we're speaking right now in 2020. We're in the middle of this coronavirus quarantine pandemic. It's been going on 8 years since 2013, which is when you left the full-time practice of architecture. Have you ever looked back?
I haven't. I kind of thought I thought I might. And I will tell you, in the last maybe 2 or 3 years, it's for those first 4 or 5, I really never looked back. For the first 2 years, I actually did some side residential real estate projects. So I sort of that first year and second year bridged the gap between architecture and real estate. So it was like 90% real estate and 10% architecture. Third year in, I said no more, completely cut ties with it. I really didn't want it to do. I didn't want to do it those first 2 years. I just did it for a financial safety blanket, so to speak. And after that third year, fourth year, fifth year, I never really even thought about it. When people would bring it up, I would, no, no. It's only here been maybe recently that I've actually thought about designing and building and developing maybe my own personal home and potentially one or two others. Um, I don't really miss the architecture world that much. If I missed anything about it, it would be the design and the space planning and really putting the materials together. But I don't want to go through the headaches of permitting and trying to read somebody else's mind to design what it is that they want. And, the fact that one project takes a year or 2 years or 3 years. I mean, right now I get a client and within 45 days, we're done. You know, there's a lot less time to disappoint somebody in 45 days and you could be a rock star.
Yeah, amazing, amazing, incredible. Now, I mean, let's face it. When you left the full-time practice of architecture, it wasn't like you were an intern. You weren't just some green guy with a couple, years underneath your belt. You'd gone through the ranks. You'd become licensed. A heavy investment in that, in schooling, the licensing. Went to Texas A&M. Let's face it, college isn't cheap. You had invested a lot of your life and your career into architecture, and you were even at the principal level of a firm. And I just want to kind of get inside your mind of what was it that allowed you or that prompted you to make that enormous leap of the safety and security of something you knew and really venture
Yeah.
out into uncharted territory.
Yeah. It was scary. It sounds a lot scarier now that you say it that way, and I think about it that way. And you start to think like, I don't know if I would be able to do that again. At the time, it wasn't quite as scary. Um, but just kind of going back, I remember that very first job, right out of school. So I was an intern. I didn't have a license yet. Um, I actually still had to go through the intern development programs. I wasn't in When I graduated, I was in that like weird space before you could graduate and go straight into taking your test. Um, and so I ended up having to graduate and do the IDP and all that mess. So it was like a 3.5 year process just to knock out those 800 or 900 credits. And I remember I was dating a girl at the time. I remember being at her house and just sitting on their back porch with her and her parents, and just I was having like this real battle with what I was doing. It's like there was a certain chunk of it that I loved, but I was also, you know, somewhat fresh out of school and sitting at a computer all day. It was just not working for me. And I didn't know why or really how to express it other than just, probably running my mouth and being a young 20-year-old. And I'm sure it sounded terrible to her parents, but if you fast forward through those 14 years, I don't think that ever really went away. And I don't know that I could ever explain it. And I don't think I was being very honest with myself. And I have an extreme drive to be successful. So I just kept pushing up the ranks, pushing up the ranks, pushing up the ranks. And I had some strategy behind becoming a principal that early in life too, because I wasn't even 40 when I was named principal. I think I was 32. Um, yeah, 31 or 32. So it was very early to be a principal of a firm. And so I stayed in the smaller mid-range firms. I never went to a firm where I would be, one of 100 or one of 2 or 300. So part of it was strategy. The other part of it was just an extreme drive to be the best, to learn more, to be a little bit more well-rounded and not just be a designer or just be a CA guy, and, to have like a broader range, to be really good at speaking with people. I took classes on public speaking outside of work and things like that so that I could start to go to presentations. So I really just made this big, huge push to become the best I could early on, sort of knowing at some point I wanted to have my own firm. Um, so some of it is, most people probably don't get to a principal level in those 13 or 14 years of their career. Um, but I basically got there and I just didn't like what I saw. I mean, the money wasn't there, to be honest. I mean, not that you work just for money, but the money wasn't that great. Um, you know, um, the firm that I worked for, there were three partners, and then there was maybe a handful of principals, and then everybody else from there was the project architect or project manager, and down the line, and we had some CA people. And so I was like, I don't know if I really want to own a firm after seeing, how things work. That particular office was in the um, education space, and if a bond didn't pass, or if you didn't get the bond work, there really wasn't anything else to work on. And we weren't doing, bond work for schools and education and fire stations, or, there wasn't another account. And I thought, man, it's amazing when a bond passes, because you have tons of work for years, and then eventually it just dries up. And so I just was not feeling great about it. And then I had worked for two other firms prior to that, and I saw a lot of the same things in those firms. Um, in 14 years, we had gone through, at least 3 or 4 downturns. And so I kind of look back at the market in those 14 years and say, okay, well, was it the market's fault, or was it the office's fault? A few of them were the market. I think everybody was just down. And then some of them were just the people that I worked for were not out hunting for work. They would get work, and they would basically sit there and work on that work and not look at getting more work. And I think that is the downfall of any business. When you're busy, you need to get busier. And I think a lot of us, myself included, I have to be careful with that. When I'm busy, I tend to maybe not want to do more. And that's the time to lay on the gas and grow and expand, and create a life for other people. And I just never saw that at a single architectural firm. And so I became very disillusioned once I got to that principal level. I'm like, this is really it. I'm not learning anything here. Nobody's teaching me. It's like, oh, you're a principal, you know everything. And I'm like, I don't. I'm 32 and I've only been doing this for 14 years. Somebody teach me. I'm like wanting to soak up knowledge, and I wasn't getting it. And so I think at that point it was just like, I can't continue doing this. And so I had a lot of these conversations with my wife. We hadn't been married that long. But she's kind of a go-getter type A personality. You can complain about it once or twice, and then after that you need to do something about it or shut up. And I had talked to my parents. They're a little bit more relaxed and comforting, right? Because they're your parents. And it's just we didn't have kids. I had a little bit of savings. Our bills weren't super high, and it was dual income, and she was just like, you just need to go for it. And oh, by the way, I'm quitting my job, or I'm going part-time, and I'm going to work 2 days a week and go back to school. So literally in the same week, I quit my job, so no more income, and she was down to 2 days a week going back to school. So it was a big, huge decision. I don't know if I can really speak to how we did that, but I think we felt confident in ourselves. I think we felt confident with what was going on in the world at the time. And I just knew that if I could get to a principal at 13 or 14 years, I think I had been a principal for a year and a half or 2 before I quit. If I can get to a principal that quick, someone else will hire me in architecture. So if I really stink at being a real estate agent, I can always go back. Like, I knew I was good at architecture, and somebody would hire me and pay me something. It may not be as good. I may not go back into being a principal, but I could go somewhere and make at least $50,000 or $60,000 and sustain my family until I figured out what was next, or jump to another higher position somewhere else. And I think that all those things lined up. My wife pushing me out of the nest, my people in my life being supportive, having a little bit of savings. It wasn't enough to sit there and live for an entire year to figure it out, but and I did get 1 or 2 small architecture jobs that were bringing in $3,000 or $4,000. So I was kind of like, okay, I'm probably gonna, after taxes and some expenses on the architecture side, I'll have $5,000 or $6,000, $7,000 to help me in that first 2 or 3 months while I figure this out. And so we just jumped off the cliff and ran into it. And I knew too that, I may not get this chance again, because at some point we were going to have kids and expenses were going to grow, and it can still be done during those times, but it's just more difficult. And I think it's more challenging mentally. So there was a lot of things that lined up. And I just said, the heck with it. Let's just go for it. Worst case scenario, we don't have any income for 6 months, and I go back and work for somebody, and hopefully I work for somebody that will actually teach me more about the business.
So you signed up with Keller Williams, and for our listeners, Keller Williams is, last time I checked, the largest real estate company in the world. And at the same time, Keller Williams also has an incredible internal training program. I mean, even so much so that I've wanted to reach out to some of the local agents here and see if I can sneak in on some of their internal training meetings. Meaning they train their agents very, very well, like next level training. What I'd like to ask you, Matthew, is it's for those who aren't familiar with real estate, it's nothing to sneeze at that you've been able to be in the top 1% of realtors in Houston. I mean, we know that, look, you got licensed in 14 days. So if people think that there's a lot of architects around, I mean, think about the real estate. Like anyone who has a free week, 2 weeks on their hands can become a licensed agent. Now they're out there selling homes, right? So there's probably even less differentiation. What do you think have been really the keys to you having the success that you've had in the real estate world?
I will say that the training here is, like you said, it's bar none. And it's not just training on how to be a realtor. It's training on what does your mindset look like? How are you operating your day? What time down to how do you when do you wake up in the morning? What are you eating? They really dive into, how you run your life and how you live as a human, and really try to upgrade you as a person. And I think through all those things, and when I was writing The Smart Simple Life, I was looking for all those things. I was trying to figure out, how do I become better? How do I become a better husband? How do I become a better future father? How can I be better to my parents, the people around me? And this wasn't from an egotistical way of wanting to be the best. It was really more about, I think, what's the point of being on the earth if you're not trying to go to the next level for yourself and then rub off on all the people around you and create a positive influence for others? And so really through all that, I just really started to open up and expand my mind and really realize the possibilities. And then I knew that the only game that I was playing is how many negative thoughts, how many limiting beliefs could I move out of the way in my own head to become the person that I dream and think about, right? I don't want to live a beautiful life in my head. I want to live it for real. And the only way to do that is to remove limiting belief, stop beating yourself up, stop thinking that you can't do it. And I still use all of those things today because I still have fears. I still have shortcomings. And I think it's a never ending thing until you're 90 or 100 and you slide into home. You're constantly upgrading your life so that you can be better. You can be better for your kids and your family. So that was the foundation. So from there, I started learning these things. The other thing is I came into that Ignite training, and I think a lot of people come in and they try to tailor things to what they like to do or what they're already comfortable doing. And you can't be successful being comfortable all the time. You got to get out of that zone. So I went in there and I just listened, and they told me to do, send a letter to every single person start doing open houses like you've never done them before. And so I put on a suit, I was clean cut and groomed, and I just went out there and did exactly what I was told to do. I wasn't trying to reinvent the wheel. I was following the model, and I worked 8 days a week. And I just grinded it out for an entire 2 years to really build a name, build a brand. And I came to Keller Williams to get an outline on what to do and to learn some more of these mental skills, and it worked. The other part of that is I just have a really intense drive to be good, to be the best, to see how good I can do, right? How far can I get? How far can Matthew Gullo get in life? Not just from a financial standpoint, but how far can I go? And so with that attitude and that mindset paired with the training and just actually listening to what they told you to do and doing it, most people don't. it allowed me to, sell 20 homes that first year, and, be honored for it.
I mean, that's amazing. And to give our audience some context here, an average agent, how many homes a month might they sell?
7. I mean, that's a year.
Yeah, so a month.
Yeah. A month.
Yeah.
I mean, like 0.01, 0.02. Yeah. It's very, very low.
So you were hitting almost two houses a month.
Yeah. In fact, so in January when I started, I sold 0, right? In February I sold 1. In March I sold 3, and then in April I sold 6. Wow. And I was a solo agent, and I was so busy I couldn't do a whole lot other than service those 6 people. And so in May it went back down to 0, and then I ramped back up again and had a really, really good end of the year and an amazing December. And that's kind of how it went. It was this roller coaster because I couldn't keep pressing on the gas when I got the 6 deals, and I didn't know what I was doing that much, But thankfully, with the support of Keller Williams and the team that I had here, they weren't on my team or people I hired, but some of the staff here, I was able to pull that off. So,
what would you say would be the main differences in mindset and who you were being when you were an architect versus how you've grown and who you need to be today to deliver what you're doing?
That's a fantastic question. I would say, honestly, when I was an architect, I could probably get away with being a little bit more lazy because I was working for someone else and I was sitting behind a computer a lot of the time. Or I could maybe put something off until the next day or over the weekend, and I can't do that anymore. There's not a whole lot of putting things off. If you want some free time or free space, you've got to hire people and create leverage in your life so that they can help you do those things, because you can't ever really do it all. And so I would say that's the biggest difference is you can't put it down, and that's tough. Not being able to rest or completely feel like I can stop is very difficult, especially those first 3 or 4 years when you don't know where your next deal is going to come from. I would say after 7 years, I have a little bit more confidence and comfort level that somebody's going to call me for real estate needs. Now, if I don't stay on the pedal and continue to reach out to people and stay in touch with my community, that it's going to go way down. You have to always be on the gas. And so that's the major difference, is that even though I was a principal of a firm, there was still other people there. There was other support that I didn't hire and put in place, right? We had assistants, we had staff, we had a marketing department, and I wasn't running all of that for all 3 firms. I was just running it for one. So I didn't have to. I could be really, really good, but I didn't have to worry about it as much as if it was my own. If all 3 of those offices were mine and I was the CEO of that company, it's a lot different job. You're not really an architect, in my opinion, at that point. You're a business person and you need to know how to run a company. And so for me, I had to learn both. I had to understand how to do real estate, how to sell. Selling's not easy, and it's not that slimy sales ball, I've got a 0% credit card for you today kind of sales. You really have to really have to get in touch with people's emotional sides for selling a home, because it's completely emotional. Everybody feels like it's money related and statistics driven, and it's not. It's emotional, and then it's backed up by all of those things. So you really have to be good at a lot of different things to be a solo agent, or even a solo architectural business owner. I think a lot of people, and this is not just architecture specific, it's across a lot of businesses, but you hear of a contractor or an engineer or an architect, and they're really good at what they do. They're really good at what they do. But then they say, I'm going to go start my own business, and they have no concept of what that really means. You're really no longer an architect, an engineer, or a contractor when you start your own business. And so coming to KW, I knew that back in the architecture firm, either from reading or just kind of my own intuition. And so I knew that coming here that I would really have to be that person. And so that's the major difference, is that I'm in control. Now I have a team and some staff now, so it's not all me anymore. But I can't stop. I've got to feed other people's families too. So I'm feeding myself, the business expenses, our own home and personal stuff, plus other people's families, and they rely on me. If I quit doing things, then and start to become not profitable and I can't afford them, then I have to fire them. Whose fault is that? It's not theirs. That's not what they were hired to do. So
You mentioned false beliefs, limiting beliefs, mindsets. What have been, looking back, what have been the main false beliefs and mindsets that you've had to change to really succeed where you're at right now, from based upon when you were an architect?
man, another great question. Uh, you know, I think just the fear of not being able to do it, quitting a nice career. I was making a decent amount of money. I think, 100, 105, 110,000 as a principal, plus bonuses and having a they did a SEP. So I had, some savings put into those accounts by the company, and then I could put more in if I wanted to, so I mean, it was a fairly comfortable deal. And just, leaving that, there was a lot of fear around that. It's like, I feel like I really can do better than that, but I don't know. So I think there's still, every day I wake up with a little bit of fear, like, are you gonna be better than you were last year? Can you keep it going? Yeah, we had a fantastic April, but how, is May and June and July, are they going to be good? Or are they going to be zero? And then, what you did in May or earlier in the year, hopefully you save some money, because now you've got to pay for 4 months of personal expenses for your staff. So, I think there's always a little bit of a fear of, can you do it? I think some of the things right now are, a lot of times you'll get to ceilings. So when I got to about 6 million and 200 or 250,000 in revenue, I was kind of like, how am I going to get to 300 or 400? I don't know what I need to do to get out of my own way, and then what systems or models, or do I need to hire somebody? So sometimes, even though there's a lot of training and there's a lot of really great people around here that I can bounce ideas off of, and have relationships with people like you that are thinking this way, sometimes you feel alone, and you just don't know who to ask or who to turn to, or those people just, like, they don't know exactly how to help you. They don't live in your brain. So I think a lot of that is just, can be very limiting, and can be very lonely. I'm trying to think of some other things, just fears. I think exposure, being vulnerable and putting yourself on video, putting yourself on social media, putting some of the things that you think out there and wondering if people will like it or if they'll be turned off. What if you put the wrong things out there, or you say the wrong things? It could really damage your business. So, but you still want to be yourself. You want to be authentic, because that's what attracts people to you. So, I think the fear of building your tribe. Who is your tribe? Are you okay with losing some of the people that you think should be in your tribe that maybe won't like you after you say a certain thing? That's something that's really popping up for us right now, as we get more into video and social media, and me speaking my voice. Another thing is, I started writing a book a while back, and have kind of stopped a little bit, because I'm just afraid that nobody's going to want to read it, or it's just dumb, or it's just, I think a lot of it's just fear. Maybe just that's it in general. There's just a lot of fears that come up, and you have to be strong enough to get rid of them, and strong enough to know that you're worrying about stuff that truthfully probably doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's, so true. I mean, so true. For those who are business owners, they probably identify with that idea of fear. If you're still in a comfortable job, you may not really understand what it's like to be out on your own, and just to realize that you eat what you kill, and that nothing is guaranteed for tomorrow. Oftentimes I've thought, Matthew, that almost in an employee environment where I'm an employee, that employees, looking back to when I was employed, that it's almost a false sense of security, it seems. Because when you look at it, what employee is truly completely provided for, right? You could get hit by a car tomorrow, your house could burn down, you could get fired or laid off. And so it's interesting that, that we talk about fear being the imagined worst case scenario, right? But it's almost as if being an entrepreneur, being a business owner, kind of really exposes you to that very frontally, very, very rawly, in a very real manner. And it's difficult to deal with. How do you deal with it? What tools, what techniques? I mean, I'm sure Keller Williams is a lot about the mindset. What have you found to be powerful for you to overcome that fear? Because let's face it, that's something that would stop a lot of people in humanity from moving forward, is just getting paralyzed by the fear, by the worry, and not showing up as the best selves.
Yeah. No, I mean, you're 100% right. I think that stops most people from changing careers or going from an architect working for somebody to starting their own firm. I think you've got to have a couple people or some really good resources in your corner to lean on. I think everybody wants to be a part of a tribe on some level, and I think if you can build that tribe, even if not, a lot of people say, oh, well, I need a mentor. Like Enoch has to be my mentor, and I have to be able to call him and dialogue with him every day. But if there's somebody that's already engaged in your world, they listen to your podcast, they read your articles, you are a mentor to them already, even if you don't know each other. And so having those guides and those resources, they give you fuel and they give you a leg to stand on and a foundation. Reading different types of books, connecting with people. I think if you feel like you have a network and people you can lean on and ask questions for, it just starts to make it easier. And you realize that it's not just you. You don't have to do everything. Now you're going to have to do the work because your mentors aren't going to do the work for you, but they will ask questions and hold you up, up to a certain level. And so, being here at Keller Williams, there's a lot of really great agents and people that I can ask questions. So if I get down in the dumps, or if I get frustrated with something, or if I'm having a difficult situation with a client, or, I'm just kind of having a brain freeze on what I need to do to generate new leads, I can go get a refresher somewhere around here or with somebody. So I think having that network is just really key. And I think remembering too that they don't have to be somebody that you know personally that you have to call on the phone, but you can go back and look at their material and find the answer. I have a coach, I pay a lot of money every year to actually have a coach. So I can ask once a week, I can ask questions. And if I don't have any questions, we can just have a talk or a dialogue. And I know that he's there, helping me stay in place. I mean, what great athlete, what great business person or CEO doesn't have a coach or a mentor? Everybody has something. You have church, you have a mentor, you have a parent, somebody has somebody in their corner. You're never alone. And I think if you just realize that, it makes it all of that much easier to just be on your own, and fight the fight, right? I mean, every day it's a fight. I have to get up and I have to get new leads and new listings and new buyers. Otherwise, everything will come to a screeching halt immediately. Last month was amazing, but it doesn't matter anymore.
Incredible. Now, looking back, what insights would you have about, if you were to go back and do an architecture firm now, or run an architecture firm, how would you approach it differently? What would you focus on? What new knowledge or skills would you bring to that endeavor?
First and foremost is clients. I would be very business focused. I would set it up like a business. I would set up what we call models and systems. And so what that means is that if I'm an architect and I'm doing homes, or I have a segment of my business that does homes, we know exactly what we do, and we do it the same every single time. Now, the home doesn't look the same every time, but we treat the clients the same. They come in and they do the exact same, 7-step process with us, as far as like, what is it that you want, and making them build a portfolio so that we can get inside of their heads, and I can shortcut that process with them and make more money. So I would be very focused on time, because let's face it, doing an architecture project takes a ton of time, and it sounds so good when you get a brand new home and they're going to pay you 20 grand or 100 grand for this house, and you're like, whoa, I just got a huge commission. But then you realize it's going to take you 8, 10, 12 months, and that's nothing. You might as well go to Kroger and stack groceries. So I would figure out processes that shortcut the time that I had to spend with that client, and make sure that they're getting a really good product and that they give me referrals. And my job as a business owner, first and foremost, would be getting clients, hiring the right people. You're better to hire an amazing architect and give them $100,000, even if they're supposed to be paid 60 per the industry, because he or she will do 8 times the work and make you look 8 times better for 40 grand versus hiring 3 people at 60 that aren't that great. And I like to be lean and mean. So I would rather be 5, 6, 7 people and do the same work that the team across the street's doing with 30 people, and they have a gazillion bills, and they're inefficient and they're heavy, and their people aren't that great. And that's exactly how I would start an architecture firm. I would go out and get so much work that I was stressed out and I couldn't do it all. And then I would hire the right people, and I would already have a book or a procedure lined up for how we're going to do business.
What do you see as the key to hiring good people?
A process, going through classes on how to hire people. Most people, you're not taught that in school, and it's a skill. Hiring people is a skill. And so I would find resources and try to really understand and again, develop a process on how to hire people. Here at Keller Williams, we have a process, and whenever I hire an employee, they get a disc profile test, and then they also get what's called a KPA, and that basically goes through and finds out what skills they have, and then it gauges them with all the different roles that we have for a real estate person, admin, marketing. Are they good at buyer's agent? Are they going to be good at sales? Are they good on the headset and they can call 1 million people a day? And so I'm basically figuring out their personality. I sit down and have 4 or 5 discussions with them. I ask for 3 references. I get those 3 references and I talk to all 3 of them. But then when I'm talking to them, I say, who's another person that you know that I can call that knows this person? And I go 3 layers deep. So I want to talk to at least 9 people from those 3, or 6 more from those 3. So eventually I've spoken to about 9 people, or sometimes even 10 or 12. So I really get to understand this person. I've even developed weird things like, I want to see your car. I don't come out and say, hey, I'm a creepster, I want to see your car, but I try to figure out a way to see their vehicle. Is it clean? Is it nice? Is it dinged up? If you're an architect, you want somebody who's going to be a C personality most of the time, unless they're going to be on the business development side, then you want a high I. And so I studied personalities. And so there's a process behind hiring. You can't just graduate from college, go work in an architecture firm for 3 years, get a little bit of experience, and then all of a sudden create a firm and kill it. I mean, some people might, but typically not. And so you've got to source out the skills to understand how to hire people. And I think it's an ongoing practice. I don't think that you take the class one time and you're an ace in the hole. I think you screw it up a lot. You know, and you're the owner, and you need to know that there's going to be fear. People are going to quit on you. That's scary, is when everything's churning and burning and you're feeling good and you're busy, and someone comes to you and says, hey, I'm leaving. And then you go into a complete tailspin because you don't know how to hire very well, and you haven't positioned yourself to say, okay, that hurts, that stings, but I can fix this. And I'm speaking, I've been in all those places because of having to hire and having to learn, and I still haven't mastered it. But I'm way better at it now, and I know way more than I ever would have had I just jumped straight from architecture to doing an architectural firm and not come to KW and learned a lot of the things that I've learned.
Amazing.
And that's really why I came. Yeah, that's why I came to Keller Williams, was to learn that stuff more than to be a realtor or to sell homes.
Yeah. What would you say would be some of the key insights that you've gained in terms of the business aspect? Obviously, you mentioned lead generation, client acquisition being huge, the emphasis on that. Any other key business lessons that have been aha moments? You mentioned hiring as being extremely important, talking about the models and processes. Anything else that comes to mind as kind of top shelf?
Well, in our world, we call it leads, listings, and leverage. So leads, right, is business or client acquisition. Listings for us is because, a sale of the home is less time intensive on a daily basis than a buyer. So I could probably list 50 homes with maybe 3 or 4 staff members, but I would never be able to help 50 buyers with 3 or 4 staff members. And the money is the same. And so knowing where your profit center is and what's most profitable for you. So if you have an architecture firm and you do say you have 3 different types of projects that you do, which one makes the most profit for you? Which one's the fastest, the easiest? And I think you need to have that on a churn and burn wheel. And then every architect wants to do fun and cool projects, and maybe those are the other two that build your name, build your brand, build your reputation, but maybe they're not quite as profitable or they take longer. And then leverage is people. You cannot do everything alone. I think it's really difficult to be a solo architect and try to do the books and run the business and get new work and actually sit down at the computer and draw and design and create a really good project. Doesn't happen. You need staff. And so in order to hire staff, you've got to have money. So you have to figure out what's most important. Outside of that, it's going to be mindset. I think that 4th key on top of that is what's in here between those 2 ears and how strong you are and how strong that you continue to mentally build yourself. That's it. It's really simple. I think if we make it complicated, which 95% of the time we do, and I'm included in that, I think that's what makes it really, really difficult.
Love it. Listing, leads, and leverage. I mean, as simple as that.
And then mindset.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, Matthew, thank you for joining us today on the Business of Architecture podcast. Matt, first of all, it's been amazing catching up with you after all these years.
Yeah.
And
super awesome.
Yeah, it's remarkable the success you've had. Congratulations on doing what you're doing, because I know that it's no small feat.
Yeah. Thank you.
So for those of our listeners, in this podcast, we talked about models, we talked about processes. Hopefully you're aware after listening for a while that Business of Architecture offers a program where you can come in and you can learn, save the time, take a shortcut, and learn the models and processes that work for running an efficient, profitable, impactful architecture firm. You can find out more by going to businessofarchitecture.com/smart.
I would highly recommend that. Shortcut the process and find somebody who knows what they're doing and lean into them. And the money shouldn't be an object, really, because it's going to save you time, save you effort, and springboard you into action and where you really need to be.
I love it.
Thanks for having me.
Matthew, so glad having you here.
And that's a wrap. Today's episode is sponsored by Smart Practices, the world's leading step-by-step business training program that's helped more than 103 architecture firm owners structure their existing practice so the complexity of business doesn't get in the way of their architecture. Because, you see, it's not your architecture or design skills that's holding you back. It's the complexity of running a business, managing projects and people, dealing with clients, contractors, and money. So if you're ready to simplify the running of your practice, go to businessofarchitecture.com/smart to discover the proven, simple, and easy to implement smart practice method for running a practice that doesn't get in the way of doing exceptional architecture. The views expressed on the show by my guests do not represent those of the host, and I make no representation, promise, guarantee, pledge, warranty, contract, bond, or commitment except to help you conquer the world. Carpe diem.